How's it going, everyone? It's Tavi from Weather Sponge 1000, and in this video, of course, we're going to focus on Tropical Storm Ian, which likely will become a hurricane in the very near future, and determine if this could impact Florida as a major hurricane and bring major impacts along the coast of Florida. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's begin by taking a look at the current water vapor imagery for Tropical Storm Ian at this time, and you see that it's definitely looking a lot more concerning as of the latest runs of the water vapor imagery, where we are now seeing a blow up of convection going on right around the center of circulation, which shows that this storm is almost at the point where it's going to undergo rapid intensification, and it's likely at this point. And based on how the clouds are moving at this time, we could also say with certainty that most of the upper level winds that were over Tropical Storm Ian over the past several days have now diminished, as now the wind shear is very light over this storm. So more likely than not, over the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to see the Tropical Storm Ian rapidly intensify and will likely become a hurricane within the next 24 hours, and potentially a major hurricane within the next 48 hours just before it impacts Cuba. So this is very concerning in that now we're starting to see a blow up of thunderstorm activity around the center of circulation, as it's happening at a very fast pace at this time, and we do see that there isn't a lot of stable air surrounding it either. So this is going to have an open area to likely develop into a major hurricane. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear map, we do see that now Tropical Storm Ian is in an area where the conditions are very favorable for rapid intensification, as the upper level winds are very weak, where we're only seeing 5 to 10 knot winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere, which will certainly allow this storm to rapidly intensify and organize itself as it continues its trek on further northeastward before eventually taking that northwest turn towards Cuba. So that's going to be something to keep in mind. Now, take a look at what the computer models are stating. So we have seen the certainty definitely rise over the past several days when it comes to where exactly Tropical Storm Ian, likely Hurricane Ian, will move as it heads towards the northern Gulf of Mexico. So it's pretty much inevitable at this point that the United States will experience direct impacts. Pretty much most likely Florida will experience direct impacts, potentially as a major hurricane by Tropical Storm Ian. However, there's still uncertainty for the forecast. If we were to take a look at the European model, of course, does expect this to gradually intensify, dropping its pressure down to 982 millibars. It isn't shutting it Tropical Storm Ian as fast as the GFS model, but it still wants to take this borderline to category 3 as it approaches Cuba. And if our to continue to move forward, we do see that the European model, even beyond Cuba, wants to intensify this, where the pressure drops down to the 960 millibars. However, there is good news regarding the strength of this storm as it continues to head further northward, is that there's going to be a lot of dry air this storm is going to deal with, and it's going to move slowly before it makes Ian is expected to move slowly before it makes landfall, which would certainly be good news, because that would allow the dry air to entrain the storm for a longer period of time before it impacts land. So that's a lot of time where the storm could weaken before it makes landfall, which is certainly great news. However, there could be that concern that maybe this does move a little bit faster than anticipated, or maybe this moves a little bit further eastward than anticipated, which would mean that the southern portion of Florida, the mid-central portion of Florida, would experience potentially a major hurricane at landfall. However, the further northward this moves, the more likely we're going to see a much weaker storm, so maybe to the point where maybe a category 1 could make landfall, as, let's say, opposed to category 3, which would certainly be the best case scenario. But we still can't underestimate this storm, because category 1 could still bring major impacts along the Florida Panhandle and the northwestern portion of Florida. So you don't want to underestimate this storm just because it might not make landfall as strong as you anticipate, because a Category 1, Category 2 could still bring potentially life-threatening impacts for millions of Floridians. So if I were to show you guys what the GFS model is forecasting, we do see that certainty has risen when it comes to the track forecast, where now we see that the GFS model take a track further eastward, and this is as a result of a GFS model expecting this trough to linger around a little bit more and dip further southward than anticipated, which would shift the wind direction from more of a southwestern direction to steer this a little bit further east than what the GFS model initially anticipated. However, there's still, I want to make it clear, there's still a possibility that this could take a track a little bit further westward to where more of the Florida Panhandle gets impacted rather than the western coast of Florida. So there's still that possibility depending on how this trough dips down through the northeastern United States. Will it linger around a little bit more and impose a stronger southwesterly flow, or will we see this trough move a little bit quicker to where this bridge will build in and slow this storm down, but also diminish the southwesterly winds that would steer it eastward? We just need to wait and see. However, the certainty has risen that it won't take we likely won't see the storm move all the way directly impact the extreme southern portions of Florida, as pretty much anywhere up from north of Fort Myers will likely experience direct impacts, and somewhere as far west as Pensacola. That's pretty much the range where this storm could make landfall, but southern Florida could still experience major impacts associated with this, especially if it does want to hug the west coast of Florida before it eventually makes landfall. So we're going to need to pay close attention to how this trough will move in the northeastern United States to really determine the steering flow that will be imposed over Hurricane Ian at this time. And of course, there's a likely threat that we're going to see a major hurricane make landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida. So you need to pay very close attention to this, and you need to prepare now. Anywhere between Pensacola and the Florida Panhandle, it's better to be safe than sorry. While there's still uncertainty regarding the exact track of this storm, it's very likely you will at least experience some impact associated with Hurricane Ian. So it's best to prepare now, as it seems very likely you will experience hurricane conditions somewhere along the western coast of Florida. Now, taking a look at what the Ensemble members are stating at this time, of course, the European model has been leaning towards a track further eastward and expects a landfall somewhere around Tampa, which would be definitely concerning for Tampa, because if we were to see direct impacts in Tampa and bring that storm surge right into Tampa Bay, that could be you guys could be in for an extreme storm surge threat. And of course, Tampa Bay is very vulnerable to storm surge flooding, so it's certainly something you need to pay close attention to if you're in the Tampa metro area, as there's a possibility you could experience direct impacts associated with this. But with the GFS Ensemble members, they're still leaning towards a track a little bit further westward, but we have seen the shift with the GFS model forecasts, where now the GFS model expects the southwesterly surface winds to be a little bit stronger to steer the storm potentially further eastward, closer to the west coast of Florida. So we could see that trend where this will directly impact potentially Tampa or the west coast of Florida. So you need to pay very close attention to any change in the forecast, and I'll make sure to keep you guys updated if we do see any significant changes with the exact track forecast. But nonetheless, this will be a major storm. Now, taking a look at the model intensity guidance, we do see that a vast majority of the Ensemble members do believe that this will strengthen into major hurricane status, where we could potentially see a Category 4 with Tropical Storm Ian, as the conditions right now for the Caribbean are very favorable for rapid intensification. However, the good news is that, like I've been saying, both of the computer models expect this storm to slow down as a result of two steering currents, such as the ridge just to the west, and of course the trough that's going to be just to the east of this storm. They're going to fight to steer Hurricane Ian, and as a result of that fighting, we're going to see Hurricane Ian slow down, and that will allow the dry air to potentially entrain the center of circulation to significantly weaken this storm before landfall, which is certainly a possibility. But I'd say most likely at this point we'll see Category 2 or Category 1 hurricane make landfall, but we can't rule out a Category 3, especially if this does take a landfall a little bit earlier than expected, more towards southern Florida. So we need to pay very close attention to all the scenarios and hope that there's going to be enough of a slowdown and an entrainment of dry air around the center of circulation to weaken this storm before landfall. Now, taking a look at the rainfall forecast over the next 5 days, and of course it's very concerning for Florida, where you could easily reach 15 inches of rain locally, especially towards the northern portion of Florida. And we do see this rain extend further northward into Georgia, South Carolina, and even North Carolina could get involved with heavy rain associated with Hurricane Ian as it moves northward. And even southern Florida is involved with potentially up to 7 to 10 inches of rain, which is certainly very concerning and will cause a major flash flood threat for Florida as Hurricane Ian makes its way towards the west Florida coast. Now, taking a look at my forecast when it comes to Hurricane Ian, well, likely to be Hurricane Ian, I'm expecting this strengthen into a hurricane likely by tomorrow, and then between Monday and Tuesday, I expect rapid intensification, where I'm expecting the wind speed to jump 40 miles per hour between a 24-hour period between Monday and Tuesday, where by Tuesday we should see a Hurricane Ian become a major hurricane, and I expect it to maintain hurricane status till maybe around early Thursday. That's when we should begin to see the dry air entrain the storm and weaken a bit. And at this point, the most likely scenario is that we'll see a landfall around Category 2 status along the coast of Florida, but we can't rule out the possibility that this makes landfall as a Category 3, especially if this takes the southern track. So make sure to prepare along the coast of Florida, and of course the states further northward, you still could experience major flooding associated with this, and of course very strong winds and potentially a major storm surge threat as Hurricane Ian continues to move on further northward. But yeah, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.